My name is Natalie Perez, and I have an interview with the member of the band American Standards on May 6, 2026. So it's been about over 10 years since we last spoke way back in 2015. And before that, the very first time was 2013. Can you give me a little summary for me on what had happened between then and now?
Yeah, how wild. 13 years. The first album was put out June 30th, 2012, and our final album was put out on June 30th, 2025. And I think you've been with us for that entire ride, just about. So, first off, appreciate you sticking with us because, wow, have we had a ride through that time. We probably switched members about a dozen times in that time, labels more times than I can count. And yeah, no, it was crazy. I mean, we literally started, most of us had been in bands before.
Mhm,
We I think most of us were starting to transition into like what's next after doing these bands that we were hoping would be like full-time things for us.
mhm,
And we kind of just stumbled into each other. Cody, our old guitarist, had hit us up on or hit me up on Craigslist and basically just said like, "Hey, I know you've done some projects that were like things that I like. You want to get together and just like start doing cover songs, start jamming, just nothing serious, just for fun. Let's get in a room and play some music." And and then that evolved into 13 plus years of playing music together with various members throughout that time. So it's kind of weird when you stop like looking or trying to make something work. Somehow all the pieces just magically fall together and it works. And definitely the longest band I've ever been in. Played more shows with more bands that we looked up to, featured in more magazines, and everything that we wanted to do when we were really pushing. When we stopped pushing, it all just kind of fell in line.
mhm. You, of course, released your debut album and the recent album, Future Orphans. Were those the only two releases, or did I miss a few?
I think in total, I think we did seven or eight. Yeah, 7 or 8 albums in 13 years. Orphans was absolutely the last one. Before that, we put out really, I like to call it an album. It was really just an EP
Hmm.
called Dopamine. Sorry, geez, now I'm spacing on the album names here. We put a damn. Why am I struggling for dopamine dealer? Yeah, dopamine dealer, I think. Geez. Wow. It's crazy how much I've already lost track of the albums here. Well, let's say we put out a album before that was really just an EP. We did Anti Melody in 2017, which was a full length album that we went to California to record
Hmm.
at a studio that was recommended by a good friend of ours, same studio that did bands like Mars Volta and Bad Religion and all these other bands that we grew up loving. And yeah, a few albums before that too. There's a Death of Rhythm and Blues, Hungry Hands. There's a lot in there. It's all a blur. So much space covered in that 13 years.
Hmm. Both of the two full lengths that I just mentioned, they were recorded by Jay Mass at Gateway Records. Why did you want to work with them in particular? What did they bring to the table that you just said, okay, we worked with you once, now come back and work with us again?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the last album was a lot about putting a bow on lots of things that we had done over time, and for the people that stuck with us, trying to do some callbacks that they might appreciate, and for the people that maybe are just brand new to us, that maybe they start looking into it and digging into the album, they see that there's all these little connection points. So when we did Still Life, that was literally from probably the most organic album I've ever done in my entire life. We got in a room, we had been playing covers, we had done some house shows, and then we said, well, let's just try to write some original stuff and see what comes from it. And we went to a local studio here. We recorded the first was it 7 or 8 songs for Still Life in a course of I think 2 weekends. So wrote these songs and recorded them in 2 weekends, and still look back at that as being one of the things I'm most proud of as a musician in 25 plus years of playing music because it came together so organically. And we put some demos up, and I'm sorry, Jay had reached out to us
Mhm.
and said he was from the band Defeater, and we, knew that band at the time. So he reached out and said, "Hey, like I'm interested in working on this with you guys." So he had mastered that album. Then going, fast forward to when we put out Future Orphans, we were thinking, how can we get these people that had been involved at some point throughout this process back in on this? And having him master it just made sense. We loved Still Life. Putting in his stamp on Future Orphans just made sense to us. And we did the very same thing with like bringing a lot of guest musicians in to play little guitar leads. We had Sammy from the Fair and Debonair and You're Young, a band that we had done our very first tour with back in 2012. He put some guitar leads on one of the songs on Kodak Stare. We had some people do some guest vocals that have been with us throughout the ride, whether they toured with us or had been featured on other albums that we had worked on together. So we just thought it was a cool thing to kind of put these little Easter eggs in there that
Mhm.
once again, like you could kind of dig into it and be like, all right, they really thought this out. And honestly, we had some time to think it out because I think, spent 2.5 years recording Future Orphans, which was never the case for prior albums. It was always get in a room, jam out the songs, go to the studio and record it. This was, something that we went back and forth to the studio well over 24 times, just refining it, trying to put those little layers in there that people might appreciate.
So for those watching this, they might not be aware that sadly the band did decide to call it quits. So if anyone watching this thinks that the band is still active, sadly they aren't. So tell me what happened? What made American Standards decide to say we're done? What was
Yeah,
the
no, I mean, we started this in our 20s. I'm 40 now, so I just turned 40. I mean, huge chunk of my life went into this. And I think like I said, when we started it, we didn't expect it to be something that grew into this thing that lasted for over a decade. But we did know what we wanted when we first started recording actual original songs. We knew what the purpose of the band was. And I think a lot of bands kind of go into it and they don't really have a vision of where they want to go. And then ultimately, they play their last show without even knowing it's their last show. And it kind of sucks. Like it's like more often than not, a local band has one album, maybe two albums, or they, do one tour and you never hear from them again. With this, we had a very clear vision of what we wanted to do with American Standards. We knew from the beginning it wasn't about being like the biggest band or the heaviest band or the most technical band. At that point, since we had come from other bands, we wanted to use a band as a platform to really kind of elevate other art that we really appreciated, and also to use it as a platform to raise awareness for different causes.
Mhm.
We had a lot of things happen in the time that we'd been a band. Our guitarist that originally reached out to me to start the band, Cody, had committed suicide, unfortunately, right around the time of Anti-Melody, so right before that album came out. And so we've done a lot of work since then for suicide awareness and prevention.
Mhm.
We also early on did a lot of work with Teen Lifeline, which is a suicide prevention line specifically for youth and teens. My father, right before Anti-Melody album came out as well, passed away of cancer. So we've done a lot of work for the American Cancer Foundation. So we just knew that, like, okay, as a band, we can go play a show. And when you split it between 4 or 5 guys, maybe make a couple $100 a piece and a couple drink tokens if you're lucky. But when you pull that all together and you got a couple $1,000s that you can then donate to a cause, and then also encourage other people and other bands to do the same thing, that's just like a really cool thing. Like it's something that I feel like it's like a snowball. It can become bigger and bigger as more people realize that you can use your platform to do something good. So that was something that we always wanted to do with American Standards. And then we also always wanted to show people that, like, I mean, you and I have talked countless times throughout the last decade plus, but we're like the least like metal presenting band when it comes to the people that we are. We're just like very down to earth, very silly people that are furthest from being serious, although we talk about serious stuff in our songs. And we never want to be the band that just always played hardcore shows and always played metal shows. So very early, we made it a point to, anytime that we were being put on a show, champion other bands that we appreciated that were vastly different styles. And then when we were setting up shows and doing compilation albums, trying to feature those bands too. That's something that we did with the last album, Future Orphans, and also a Dopamine Dealer and many other albums. We brought in people like Cody from the God Samaritan, which is a local hip hop artist, which very different, but it just worked. We work with people like Chelsea from Fairy Bones, which is like an alternative, female-fronted alternative rock band that I really think like brings just a really cool energy. And we just always try to bring in people that we thought, okay, even if you don't listen to metal, you might appreciate the message of this other person, or you might appreciate the energy they bring to a show. Every album release show that we did, we always try to bring bands from all different styles to show people, like, if you're in the room, it doesn't matter what you listen to. When you see the energy that they bring, you can get into it. It might not be your favorite thing when you go back and listen to it in your car, but when you're in that room, you can really vibe off that energy. And that was just always important to us. So after doing it for so long, pandemic happened in 2019, 2020, we're not playing shows. And it was kind of this reset moment. Like we had done this thing for so long. It's now we actually had a break to like sit back and think like, what's really next when venues start opening back up. At that point, we had done well over, I think, 600, 700 shows or so throughout the course of the band. And we came back from a pandemic doing our first show with the Bled, which is just this, it felt like this moment where we're just like, wow, things are bigger and better than ever. And then we went on this little tour and every single show was almost sold out. And it felt like, what a cool thing to say, okay, now that like there's this new like energy behind this,
Mhm.
let's end on a high as opposed to have this lull out like a lot of those bands do that I mentioned, where it's just you end up playing your last show and then you just don't realize it's your last show. So we at that point, I think, posted on social media, talked to a bunch of different people, maybe even through the press stuff that we were doing with you and mentioned it. But we basically said we're going to be a band for one more year, and in that year, we're going to book every show we can, and every place that we play, we're going to tell them it's the last time we're going to be there. We really want to make it count. That way, it was like kind of an official goodbye to, in a way, to people where we can just play longer sets, connect at different venues that we have played at over the years. And then going into recording that last album, know that every sound that we recorded would be the last thing that we recorded as a band together. So it just felt right. It felt right to like end on a high because I think far too many bands kind of fizzle out. So, and I think the byproduct of that is the cool thing is in that time that we've been a band now we see these mixed genre shows that actually seem to work in Arizona. Like we see a lot of shows where there's hip hop artists and alternative rock and metal and punk and everything else. And people actually show up at the beginning of the show and they stay till the end, which for the longest time, it was those mixed genre shows. Like people show up and they'll leave right after the band they came to see. So I can't say that we are absolutely responsible by that in any means, but I can say that was a thing that we wanted to see ourselves. And we always try to be a band that was able to do that.
If the band hadn't called it quits, would you have considered performing either of the two full-length albums live from front to back?
Yeah, so we did that with Anti Melody once or twice. Man, I would love to do that with Future Orphans. I don't know, like I just the thing is like when we called it quits, like there was no bad blood, no animosity or anything. So
Mhm.
I never wanted to frame it as like, okay, it's off the table that we at some point decide that we are going to do some one-off for a good cause or do something like that. So who knows? Maybe it's in the cards in the future, but we're
Yeah.
definitely never going to be another band, another active band that puts out another full-length album or anything substantial or another full tour. The band that one of my very first bands called The Hostage Situation from when I was literally a teenager. We just about 7 years ago or so started doing an annual show for charity for a local cause called Rosie's House. And they're essentially a local charity that gives instruments and music education to underprivileged youth here in Arizona. And we do that show once a year now. We put out our first song in 18 years. So it was 18 years from the last album that we did to this song that came out called The Last Leg. And yeah, we do that annual show now, and it's just a really cool thing. It almost feels like a reunion, but like not the reunion where you go see a bunch of people that you don't want to see and you haven't stayed in contact purposely for. It's like these are people that I remember going to shows with, half a lifetime ago. And we do that with the hostage situation. So like maybe someday American Standards gets to that, but I don't know. Like I keep the doors open. I just know that we're probably never going to go back to being like a full-time band that does all those tours and full lengths again. And honestly, I don't know if my knees or anything else could withstand doing that anymore. After American Standards, I was doing some stuff. We were doing some cover band stuff, and I actually tore something in my knee. And since then, I'm like, man, I'm feeling my age for the first time in my life.
Out of all the releases, the albums, the EPs, everything, was there any material that didn't make the cut that you could see releasing in the future, or everything that was released is it?
Yeah, we put up a few songs actually. I think that was earlier this year. We just put them up on YouTube because the recordings, I'll be completely blunt, the recordings are not the best, but they are things that we recorded that first few months of being a band. We put them
Mhm.
up on YouTube just as a fun thing to point people to. I think it was like the anniversary. It was probably our band anniversary or something like that. It was some significant date, and we said, okay, we've got these few recordings from back in the day. Let's throw them up on YouTube. Let people check them out if they want to. Outside of that, I think we've only got two other songs that were recorded at like a home studio that are just kind of floating around. One actually doesn't even have full lyrics, and I've thought full vocals on it. I've thought for a while, like it might be kind of cool to go back and like lay a vocal track down on this song that we recorded, I think at this point, 14 years ago, 14 or 15 years ago. So yeah, maybe we definitely do have a few things out there, but definitely nothing the caliber of like the albums that we've released. They're all just kind of home recordings and things of us finding our way. But they're fun to listen to. Like I go back and listen to some of those old things. I'm like, wow, we were really at that time just like we just did not care about like what we sounded like. I don't want to say did not care about what we sounded like, but we got in a room and we just played the song. Like we just wrote together and organically at the end we said, okay, this is the song. We're not going to sit in the studio for weeks and months refining it. And like there's a cool energy about that to me. That's why I like Still Life so much, is it's raw and it just feels like effortless.
Mhm. So do you see the band ever coming back full time or just doing one-off shows like you had mentioned?
Yeah, no, I can't see it coming back full time. I mean, like for multiple reasons. I think like it's purely just like the purpose. Like I can't see what the purpose would be to come back at this point, just because I do see like so many of those mixed genre shows that are doing so well in Arizona, which is something that we were always about. I see a lot of these bands that are doing things for charities, kind of carrying that torch of doing things for a good cause. Like, and there's just so many young bands out there that are so talented and so great. Like, not to say that there's not room for us, but I rather have them shine. And like this might sound silly, but I mean this wholeheartedly. But the last maybe even 5 years of being a band, we all the shows we were doing were either shows where we were headlining the show, or we were opening for a band that we had always grown up looking up to, like a band that was doing a 10-year, 15, 20-year reunion or an anniversary show. And I started almost like feeling guilty, and this kind of sounds weird, but I almost started feeling guilty because I started thinking like, knowing our purpose and our trajectory as a band, like we did not want to be the band at that point that was going to go on the road and play 300 shows a year or get signed to this label and make it our full-time job. That was not the purpose of the band. But there are younger bands that absolutely want to do that. And every time that we got put on these shows as headliners or opening up for this big national band, I always thought there's a smaller, younger, hungry band that could take that spot, win this crowd over, and then do what we did for the last, 15 years and travel the world and put out albums and do their things. So I almost feel like us taking those spots, just because we had been around for a while and the promoters in town, people had known us, they were giving us those spots when they could have been giving them to these other younger bands that like really deserve that spotlight. So yeah, I can't imagine it doing it full time again. But I miss it absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But I also like doing it as much or as little as I want to do it.
Mhm, mhm.
And also, like, I can't keep up with all the trends. I can't keep like TikTok and everything else. Like, we're not a band that does well on any of those platforms anymore. We're late 30, early 40-year-old dudes that like I think people hopefully still connect with our music, but we're not going to be on TikTok dancing to promote it.
The band did get, chances to play shows here and there as well as touring with, various acts, as you had mentioned. Whereabouts did you make it to? And did you ever come out this way to California? If you did,
Absolutely.
I never got a chance to see you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think the West Coast was the most common. Like I think at least 2 to 3 times a year we would try to hit the West Coast. We did a very similar route almost every time. We'd kind of start, we'd go out a little bit east, we'd go to New Mexico, come up through like Colorado, Nevada, then weave our way up through California, Oregon, and Washington. We had done that route at least a dozen or more times. But we played the Midwest a lot. We ventured out east a little bit, not as much as I wish we would have. Um, what I really wanted to do with that last year as a band, the cards didn't align, was I wanted to do 3 distinct tours. I wanted to do one full West Coast tour, a couple weeks on the West Coast, a couple weeks on the Midwest, and then our last tour on the East Coast. But at that point, Corey, our guitarist, he had just had a kid. Our drummer also had a family, kids, and everything as well. I obviously got married, had a kid, so it's just one of those things. A lot of things happening with life where it didn't line up. So we did try to make every show count. We did a couple California shows. I think mostly when we played in California, we played places like San Diego, Los Angeles. We played Sacramento quite a few times, San Francisco, places like that. Then also a lot of the smaller towns. Like honestly, some of my favorite shows in California and Nevada is another great example. Like the scenes that are really saturated, where you've got hundreds of bands and hundreds of shows. my favorite shows were always the shows that weren't in LA. They're the shows that were like in the small little cities, you know. Like we were playing like Apple Valley and stuff like that, that where people would just like the what's called the Inland Empire area, like that people just really appreciate those shows a lot more because they don't get them as often.
If you could go back and talk to yourself after all these years of when the band first formed way back when up until now, talk to yourself from the person way back when, what would you say? What sort of advice would you give
Yeah.
yourself? That's what I
If
was
it,
trying to say.
no, I got you. I got you. If it was present me talking to me prior to American standards, there are a few key lessons I wish I learned so much earlier that I try to pass on to any musician that I talk to now. And I've done it, like it's been a bit since I've done it, but I used to do a lot of music conferences and podcast circuits and things like that. And if anything resonates with a younger musician, I would say one is have realistic expectations. If your expectation is to be the biggest band in the world that makes a living being a band that is on the hugest label playing with the biggest bands, like there's always going to be disappointment along that path. You might make it there someday, but it's not going to be overnight and it's going to take a lot of time. So I think setting those smaller goals and looking at what that bigger goal is so important. As American standards, we at that point I had learned that lesson. I had been in other bands and we had been frustrated because we'd feel like, hey, we got this big show and we played it, and then afterwards it felt the same, you know, like it didn't feel like we really elevated to another level. Or we would get put in a magazine and we're like, all right, everything's going to change, and then it kind of feels a little bit more of the same, and it was a slow burn, and you get disappointed, you end up getting frustrated. That's when the arguments happen in the band and in the van on tour, like when you're traveling 6 hours between shows, and then you end up breaking up, and it's just easy to happen when your expectations aren't realistic. So I think setting those small goals along the way, like as American standards, it wasn't even about playing shows, and then it became, okay, like it'd be cool if we could play some house shows. All right, let's play some venue shows. Okay, let's play with a touring band, and then let's like having those little steps and being excited about every one of those steps. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that we expected was to have the 4 or 5 of us on a stage playing music. If there were people there that were to watch it, that was a plus. If those people liked it, it was a bigger plus. All those things that came from it after, whether it be, meeting people like you that are featuring us on your websites, or like Alternative Press and Decibel and Revolver that were putting us in their magazines, and all these other cool things that we got to do. Those were like all cherries on top, but we never expected them. So if they didn't happen, we wouldn't have been disappointed. So I think that's important. I also think like just understanding not to like, there are bands that are going to start after your band, and their trajectory might be quicker. They might get bigger faster, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you need to change paths. I think a lot of bands do that. They see this big trend that's happening, and then they immediately change their music or the way they dress or the way they present themselves online and everything else to try to chase a trend that's happening to see if they can get that same buzz. And if you're chasing that trend, you're always going to be a step behind. Like you're never going to be bigger than the band that started that trend or than the bands that are already doing it. So sometimes just sticking to it, things will catch up with you, American Standards is it's music that I listened to growing up, and it's been long from being super popular. Like its peak was probably back in the early 2000s, and we grew up listening to it, and then we started playing it, and then bands, over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, started doing the style again. And then we got kind of that resurgence, like I said, when we came back from the pandemic, where you've got bands like Knock Loose and Vane and all these other bands that are playing that old school, like hardcore metalcore sound. So if you stick to what you're doing, like people will catch on to it, or the cycles will catch back up to it. But chasing the trend is never going to get you what you think it's going to. Or at least if it does, it's not going to be like something that sticks around for a long time. You're going to be constantly chasing the next thing.
And last question, since having helped you after all these years with news posts, reviews, interviews, whatnot, what is one core memory you would like to take away from it all after all this time?
Yeah. The biggest thing, I mean, for you, one-on-one personal is just, and I would expand this to anybody that's featured us or done anything for us, come to a show or anything. But I just want to say, like, I am so grateful and thankful for people like you and you specifically, for spending any time on a small band like us. Even this, whatever it's been, 20 or 30 minutes now that we've been talking, like you have a life, you have other things you could be doing. There are other bigger bands that would be happy to have the opportunity, and there are also small, hungry bands that were clamoring for time to get featured on things. So I just genuinely appreciate every time that you've spent any time, responding to an email, posting us on your social media, posting us on your website. Like that's just like the gravity of that does not like get lost on me by any means. When we were playing those headlining shows and people came to see the bands that played before us and they stuck around till 11 o'clock at night to watch us play, when they had to go to school the next day or go to work the next day, like I don't care if it's 5 people or 500 or 5,000 people, like every single person that did that for us, like changed our life in such a significant way. And I mean this so deeply, like I, like the entire life I had is because of that. I've been able to play in just about every state in the United States, in venues and places I've never even dreamed of. And that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for one person caring and telling somebody else, and now 2 people care, now 4 people care, and now 6. So I really do appreciate that.